Right, I believe we're ready to start. And my name is Craig Collins. I'm the CEO of Granite Warehouse Management. Um, the presentation today, I'm going to start off with some case studies and use case studies of Granite in various applications. Right, so just a little bit about Granite. Granite has been in the South African market for about 9 years now, and we have over 100 sites. We have subsequently expanded into the global market. We have a site in the US, we have a site in Mexico, a site in the UK, up in Tanzania, and a site in Dubai. We're doing quite a lot of marketing in the international market. What we are focused on is satisfying the mid-market, and that means the Sage customer base. What we realize that when you start chasing functionality in a warehouse management system, you end up building a huge complex system. It then is expensive to install, and you become a tier one product. And that's not our focus. It's not our target. So our goal is to become the leading mid-market warehouse management system globally. And we're looking to get 1,000 sites by 2023. Right, so moving into the Granite case studies. The first part that I want to talk about is the use of Granite for serialized tracking. So I have some logos up on the screen, and those are some of the customers that are using Granite in a serialized environment. So we start off departing from warehouse management and talking really about how can you track serialized items, and Granite does that really well. So for example, at Pure Gas, we track gas cylinders from empty through the filling stage to dispatch onto the truck and to the customer. We're at FNAF doors and windows. Every door frame and every window frame and every door is tracked with a unique serial number. It means that stock take is really easy and they can find missing doors. At Bake It Easy, we actually track the batch of dough that's moving through the factory. And again, this is using a warehouse system, but because you've got serialized license plates that you can track through multiple locations, it allows serialized tracking. At Certa Beds, we track mattresses, and at Gina at Work, we track items of clothing in that are used in uniforms for hospitals and banking. So what is different from a warehouse management system like Granite and a inventory management system that you get as standard within Sage Evolution, for example? Well, one of the things is that Granite uses barcoding technology, and that allows us to get to a level of granularity in tracking physical stock that you just don't get with your financial systems. So an example of this is that at Vertilux in the United States, they manufacture or they supply the material used to manufacture blinds. And every roll of material is uniquely tracked through 3 warehouses around the United States. Each warehouse has 30,000 rolls of material, and every roll of material has got a unique tracking number, so we know where those rolls of material are anywhere in the country, anywhere in a specific warehouse. And each roll has got a quantity on it in square yards, and when they pick from a roll, they cut from that roll. So we are able to track every physical roll of material throughout their operation. In medical operations, such as Viking Medical, you want to track FIFO, you want to track FIFO, first expired product, and you want to track batch and expiry date. Granite manages that per box. So if you scan a box during a picking process, it will tell you that that's not the oldest one, there's an older one somewhere else in the warehouse. Likewise, it can tell you that even though there is an older one in the warehouse, we need to take one that's got a longer shelf life for a specific customer. And then at Ivident, we track everything from pallets of mouthwash right through to thousands of little dental plates that they track. And each dental plate has got a serial number. So that just demonstrates the level of granularity that you can get in a warehouse barcode system that you just don't get in the financial system. Then moving on to bin management. So warehousing, basics of warehousing is bin management. And there are multiple bins available in Evolution, for example. But the reality is that without barcode scanning, it's really very difficult to manage the transactions in those bins and going through the bins. So what ends up happening is the bins get out of date and they're not managed correctly. So because you've got scanning, what the scanning does is it allows you to scan product at the bin, into the bin, out of the bin, and those transactions are real-time live. It means the bin tracking is accurate. But in addition to that, there's additional functionality that you have around bins in warehouse management, such as the dimension of the bin, the maximum weight of the bin. And we can do various checks. So if we put something away in a bin that's, for example, marked as a food bin, you may not put hazardous chemicals into a food bin. And we can do those checks online live and stop the operator from putting things away in the wrong location, stop the operator from moving things to the wrong location. Similarly, you can put a bin on hold, which means that the stock in that bin is not available for transactions and for processes, even though the stock is available in the system. The other thing is that counting stock per bin location is really important for certain customers. And one of the things that happens is you can very easily go to a bin, scan the bin, and then check that the items in the bin match what the system says. And the scanning application together with the bin management facilitates that. Finally, it's very easy to have multiple bins for the same product and then manage one of them as a pick face. So this is in terms of the definition of a pick face. It's about having loose product that I can pick easily, and then you've got bulk product that gets moved into those bins whenever you need to replenish it to make the picking faster and more accessible. So Granite manages that replenishment process and tells you when a bin needs to be replenished, as well as where you can get bulk stock. And then finally, traceability and control is a very important component of what Granite does. Every time any transaction is done, it is put into a transaction table, and we manage and track every single transaction that happens within Granite. So for example, with medical customers, it was a requirement that you manage batches, you manage everything that happens with a batch, you manage all transactions as well as which user did it, and a history of from and to and quantity changes, etc. So our system went through a rigorous testing and approvals process for the pharmaceutical industry. Likewise, food traceability, it's another key market for Granite. People like Tacoma Foods down in Cape Town track cheese and food for Woolworths. There, every batch and expiry date is tracked per pallet, and it's integrated at a batch level into Evolution. So for the first time, their batches in Evolution actually match the batches on the physical product. Chill Beverages, it's a beverage company owned by Brian Joffe's Life Group, and it's down in the Western Cape as well. They make Score energy drinks, and they get this advantage of tracking raw materials into the process and then finished goods out of the process and through their warehouse. And the batch is tracking is maintained from the raw material issue to the job and then out on the pallets coming out into finished goods. So just in summary of that, Granite Warehouse Management is used by over 100 companies across almost 3 industries, and on actually it's 4 continents now. We're just doing a Dubai installation, and we suggest speaking to about IT and via them us through about tracking, barcoding, and warehousing. So now we move into the demonstration itself, and forgive me for going quickly, but I have to try and put this now into 50 minutes. It's going to be tough. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is master files, things like how you manage users, locations, items. Then I'm going to show you the inventory screen where you look at the detail and the transactions, etc. We'll then cover inbound processes, outbound processes, a little bit on quality control, a brief mention of how manufacturing can be managed, and a brief mention of how stock take is done. So the Granite desktop application is a thick client application. One logs in with your user, and then you get to the screen. And it was interesting, I was doing a demonstration yesterday, and it's not an impressive screen. It's a big white open space. But this is the main menu. This is what we do. 90% of our functionality takes place on the scanning device, not on the desktop application. So the scanning device screen looks like this. Now, it's a web browser. That's not to say that Granite is hosted in the cloud. It's hosted on your financial system server. So on the Evo server, it will be put into IIS and it's hosted there. And If that happens to be in the cloud, then Granite can be hosted in that cloud environment. If that is on-premise, then Granite is hosted on-premise. But you still point your scanners or a tablet or a phone or a PC using a web browser to the Granite application. Now you can see that I've scaled the screen down to the size of what a scanner screen would look like, and I'm now going to log in. So I'm going to log in with the user name and a password for that user. And what you'll see on the screen is a set of menus that's customized for a specific user function or user group. So in this case, I've got receiving, receive to pallet, label print, lookup, move, replenish, picking, take on stock, take and return. That's all that this user is allowed to do. What you'll see now when I log in with a super user account is that I've got a whole lot more menu items, and those menu items are all configurable. So one of the things that Granite does really well is allow us to make the screen as simple or as complex as the user requires. And every menu item can be renamed, every prompt can be renamed, and you can not customize, but configure the screen to be simple to use for the operator. The second thing that Granite does really well is manage business processes. And each step in the receiving process is mapped, and then we map that to a prompt on the scanner. So for example, if I enter into the receiving function, you can see it asks for the location. Now, when we define the receiving process, we define all the steps in the process. So the first one is location, then the next one is the document, for example. I'm going to come back to the actual functionality. I just wanted to demonstrate to you the way that the Granite user interface works and that we move on. So when you get an error, it says cannot find the document, for example. And in this case, it's red. If things are successful, you'll see a green message and information message is blue. And this screen is maintained as simple as possible. So we have specifically designed the system not to have a form-based screen where you go and enter multiple things on a form. And the reason for that is that means that it's very inflexible, and it means that the user learns what's on the form rather than following the business process that you map out. Our method also means that we can change that business process very quickly and on the fly. So I want to go back to the desktop application now, and I'm going to start off with master files. And then within master files, we've got categories, types, users, and these processes. I'm not going to go into processes now as part of configuration, but I'm going to just show you under users the types of permissions that we've got. So for a specific user, we can set up what user group they belong to, and then what permissions they've got on both operational permissions, inventory control permissions, maintenance, and what they can do at a stock take. So these permissions are specific to the specific user, not the specific user group. So within a user group, you can do certain functions on the scanner. Within a specific user, you can control whether they're allowed to do a certain function or not. Moving on to location. So as I said in the pre-presentation was that bin location and bin management is a critical component to the warehouse management. So what we do is we set up bins within Granite. So if I go into my bin location screen, what it does is it allows you to set up the bin name. Now, if I look at the finder, the magnifying glass here, I can go to bin AO2, for example. Bin AO2 has got a name, bin AO2, and then a barcode. Now, the barcode doesn't have to be the same as the name. So an example of that was the receiving location. Receiving location has a barcode REC. And then we've got this field, the ERP location. Now, that's a very important field because that maps back to the warehouse or warehouse location in the financial system. So as I move through the bins in Granite, every one of these bins is inside warehouse 10 on the accounting system. And that's how Granite knows whether to do integration or not when you do a move. If I move something between bin A5 and A4, because they're both in warehouse 10 in the accounting system, it's going to not need to do any integration because the stock hasn't changed in the accounting system. It's only changed in the bins in Granite. However, if I said that bin AO4 was in location 77, then when I move something between AO4 and AO5, Granite knows to send that integration requirement up into Evolution or into the financial system. Right, so what else have we got about bins? Well, we've got the site. Now, the site is not normally defined within the accounting system at all. It's a specific thing to Granite, which defines whether it's where the warehouse is. It might be Cape Town, Joburg, Durban, and we can limit users to be able to only see stock and documents and details about a specific site. So when you define a site, you define, for example, Joburg, then I define the locations within Joburg, I define the users who have access to Joburg. If I don't define a site on a user, it allows me to see across all sites. But it still maps back to the ERP location. So within a site like Joburg, you may have a warehouse for damages, you may have a warehouse for your finished goods stock, a warehouse for your raw material stock. They're all within site Joburg. And therefore, a Joburg user can see all of those warehouses. Right, additional information that we carry around the location are the dimensions, length, width, height, and the maximum weight for that location. And then there's these types and categories where I can go and define a category or a type hazardous, a type foodstuff, and then make sure that the product going into there is of a matching type or a matching category. So one of the beauties about this is you can define locations on the fly. So let's say I have a big warehouse and I've got no locations in the warehouse, and I've got all my stock in Granite and managed, and then 2 weeks later I define a new bin. All you have to do is add the new bin in Granite by defining a new bin and move the stock into that bin, and the bin is active and available for use. It's as simple as that. And Granite manages the stock per bin location. You can have multiple different products in the same bin. You can have different lots and batches in bins, and you can turn bins on and off. You can manage bins at quite a detailed level. Right, the next part of master files that I want to cover is master items. So this is the same as your item master in Evolution, and the integration between Granite and Evolution allows you to add or maintain the item code in Evolution, and it automatically pulls it into Granite. And that is a live integration. So if I go into Evo and I change my description, it will immediately be changed in Granite. The stock code, the formatted code, the unit of measure, these are the critical fields that come from Evolution, as well as things like the category and type and product grouping. But bear in mind that everything else on the screen is Granite specific. Now, it's possible to set a user-defined field on Evolution, which maps to one of these Granite fields, and then we can pull it and maintain it in Evolution. But we also have the option of maintaining it in Granite if we want to, like the dimensions of the product or the weight of the product. So what's quite nice about the Evolution product is that it's easy to define those user-defined fields and allow the users to manage the warehouse-specific information in Evolution. But in Granite standalone sites or other ERP sites where they don't have as flexible user-defined fields, we manage it in Granite. We also manage reorder level, we manage the shelf life or lead time, we manage a packaging type, for example, and we even, within the product, we can see when was the last stock date for a specific product. Unit of measure specific. You've got a base working unit of measure, which is the stocking unit of measure. That's what we normally have on this unit of measure field. But we also have various optional fields, but then we have aliases. Now, what the alias is where you map a specific SKU or barcode to a unit of measure to a product. So this specific product, the recessed adjustable downlight, I've assigned a barcode 6001, which identifies the product in a pack of 1 eaches. I then assigned a new barcode 6002 as a pack of 6 products. Now, that's how, if I was dealing with, for example, Coca-Cola, I could scan an individual bottle or a tray of Coca-Cola, and it knows that if I scan the tray barcode, I'm then dealing with packs of 6, or if I scan the unit barcode, I'm dealing with individual units. The stock code still exists as 1101DLY012. That stock code can be used as interchangeably with the alias, provided the alias is defined only for that stock code. You can't have an alias or a barcode linked to 2 different products, the same barcode linked to 2 different products. But a couple of other fields on the screen, things like require expiry date, batch number, or serial number, things like direct on hold. What direct on hold does is it puts it onto quality hold the moment that you create any stock in the system. One last thing I've got on here is a receiving allowance. I can put in a percentage of over receiving. Now, one of the requirements in evolution is you cannot over receive. You have to modify the purchase order. And that's actually best practice. That's the way I prefer to do it. But there are other ERP systems that do allow you to over receive, in which case we can allow over receiving on Granite. Right, that's pretty much all I want to cover on master items. So we're going to move along quickly. And I'm now going to talk about inventory. So in our inventory tab, you'll see I have a quality control tab, which I'm going to come back to later. We can deal with transfers, that's inter-warehouse transfers within the inventory tab. So when you create an IBT in Evo, it automatically comes into Granite as a transfer document. And then I can execute it using the scanner, scan all the product, take it through various scanner processes, and it will complete the IBT out on Evo. And then on receiving at the receiving branch, it would receive the stock in and complete the IBT. Every green icon is a report. So if I go into transactions, it shows me all transactions in the system. And if I go into replenishments, it tells me about all replenishments that I've done in the system. So these are the reports and the dashboards within Granite. One of the things that's interesting about the grids that we use is they are all sortable. So you click on the header to sort. You can go and ask for certain information. For example, what did Mark do? And those are all Mark's transactions. Or I can go and look for a specific stock code. And I can go and say, for a specific stock code, what transactions have I got for user Mark, or for user 0 in this case? And I've got those receiving transactions. So this is the full transaction record. Now, there's a lot of additional fields that can be added into this grid by going to options and columns and adding fields. So for example, I can say, show me the from location and to location. And now I've got additional fields on my transaction record that includes integration reference, from location, expiry date, etc. And that's where we find the traceability information and reporting. So we will come back to that as I demonstrate things. And we've then got this, probably the most used of all functionality on the desktop application, the stock detail and stock summary. So stock summary just summarizes the stock, but at a stock detail level, it shows you all physical boxes or pallets or things in Granite. So at this point, I need to now discuss a concept of a license plate or tracking entity. So within an inventory management system like Evolution, you have a stock code with a quantity. Sometimes you then can have a batch or serial number or expiry date linked to that stock code, which gives you slightly more granularity around the stock code. So I can have, for example, stock code A, batch test, and I then have a record in Evolution for that stock code and the batches within that stock code. Within Granite, we allow you to go to a lower level of granularity where every box or every pallet can be uniquely identified with what we call a license plate or tracking barcode. So the barcode, and it can be assigned by Granite, or it can be a pallet number that's already on the product, or it could be a serial number. So let's say I was tracking motors or pumps. They come in with a serial number. I can use that serial number as my license plate or tracking number. Likewise, I could get Granite to generate a barcode for it and store the serial number in the serial number field. But the principle remains the same in that I have the ability to have a license plate on any physical unit of stock. Now, one of the benefits of barcoding is that you are able to go to the physical unit of stock, identifying it by scanning the license plate, and then transact with that physical unit. So if I've got 10 boxes of the same stock code in the warehouse and there's no batch or expiry, all that Evolution may know about that is that I have 10 boxes and a quantity of 10 for a specific stock code. What Granite can identify about those 10 boxes is that I have 10 unique tracking license plates or barcode numbers for those boxes. And every one of those boxes can be in a different location. And I have got a full history per box of when it was received, by who, when it was moved to a bin location, when it was picked from. So at an individual box or pallet level, I can track the physical stock. And I will repeat that word physical over and over again, because that's our goal. Our goal is to make sure that Granite matches 100% to your physical inventory on the floor. And when you do a transaction, it's not an accountant sitting in front of a screen. It's an operator walking up to the physical stock and transacting with that box or that pallet. And that's a critical component and a critical differentiator between a granular scanning warehouse management system versus an inventory or financial systems view of the stock. So this stock details screen shows us the tracking barcodes that we've assigned to the products, the stock code that's linked to it. And if I go and take a specific stock code and I filter on that stock code, what you'll see is I have two tracking barcodes for that specific stock code. And the one is in D37 and the other one's in D38. The one in D37 has got a quantity of 1, and the quantity in D28, which is probably a bulk location, has a quantity of 220. In this specific case, barcode number 309 and 336 do not have batch numbers, expiry dates, or serial numbers, but it is possible for an individual box to have a batch number or an expiry date. This grid, as with any grid in Granite, can be grouped. So I can group by stock code, for example, and I can then collapse all stock codes and take a look at what I've got on a specific stock code. I can also go and sort by clicking on the header, and I can filter. So I can go into the description and I can say, show me everything with the word triple in it, and those are the stock codes with triple, and those are the barcodes. So this is where I find the detail about my stock. Right, so that's the stock, the inventory management screen. I'm going to come back to quality control and variance correction, but I've covered a lot of the other things. There's one thing more that I want to cover, and that's this replenishment tab. So when I went to my master file, master items, what I'm able to do for a specific master item is set up what pick face I'm using. In other words, which location have I got the loose stock in. So let's say for this item code, I'm going to say my loose stock is in A06, and the minimum level that I want to have in A06 at any time is 50, and the optimal level is 100. So what that does is it says, I've got pallets of bulk stock around my warehouse, anywhere in my warehouse, but when you go pick, I want you to go location to location A06 unless you're picking bulk. And when you pick from A06, it's going to manage the quantity in that location as the pick face. So when it drops below 50, it's going to tell you to replenish that quantity from a bulk location. So I'm going to set that product up in that way, and I'm now going to go and refresh my replenishment. So now you can see that for that stock code, I need to go to pick face A06, and my minimum quantity is 50, and the location quantity is currently 0. So therefore, it needs you to replenish 100 to that pick face. So that report was found under inventory replenishment. What typically happens is every day, in the morning, they would print that report out, and they would go and do a replenishment of all their pick faces so that they're ready for the picking for the day. But we don't have to print the report out. On our scanner, we've got a way to automatically, when a person says he's doing replenishment, give him the next replenishment task to do. Okay, so that covers inventory. I'm now going to move on to inbound. So under inbound, we've got this tab called receiving execution, or this icon receiving execution. And what this shows me is all purchase orders I'm expecting in the system. So these ones are untouched. The ones where I've got progress are the ones that I'm currently working on. So let's say I click on this purchase order number 1074. What you can see is that we are 30% complete with that order and with that receiving that order. And so far I've received 82 of the 100 of this first line, and I've received nothing else on the balance of the purchase order. So we're going to use this purchase order as our example for receiving, and I'm now going to, and what happens is when you add a purchase order into Evolution, it automatically pulls into Granite. Now there's two ways that integration happens. It happens on entry of the document, but then in Granite as well, whenever I use that document, I go and make sure that it's synchronized with the latest information from Eva. So this document has been part received. I'm going to carry on receiving it. So what I'm going to do is go to my scanner. And on my scanner, I have got a receiving tab. And then I've added this new one, receiving with detail, to show you the distinction between receiving or receiving with batch numbers and expiry dates. So I'm going to use the standard receiving. I need to log on again. So I'm going to log on as my user, and I'm then going to, what you would do when you log on is you can specify the label printer that you're going to be using to print labels when you receive. So I'm going to log on without specifying the printer. I'm going to go to receiving, and what location am I receiving in? Now, because you are tracking stock at a pallet level or at a box level, I can specify that I'm in the receiving location. And then you're going to put my purchase order number in, and it brings the document up. So what I can see about this document is that I'm 30% completed. The trading partner is Lighting Universal Limited. I'm expecting to receive it into warehouse 10 in Evo as well as in Granite. So every location that I receive it into must be within ERP location 10. I've specified the receiving location, and now I can see on screen the lines that I'm supposed to receive. So for this specific stock code, I've received 82 of the 100. So let's go and receive more of that specific stock code. So what you would do is type in the item code or scan the barcode. Now let's say I scanned barcode 006001. It's going to tell me that it cannot find that item on the document because it's not on this purchase order number. So I can't receive what's not on this purchase order number when I've entered that specific document. What I'm going to do is type in the stock code. And in this case, if the product had a barcode on it, I would scan the barcode. So because it's valid, it zooms into that line and shows you only that line on the screen. And I now can specify the quantity I'm going to receive. So I'm going to receive another 10. And then it asks me, what tracking barcode do I want to use? So I've now got the option of scanning an existing tracking barcode to add this 10 onto the existing tracking barcode. Alternatively, if I just press enter, it's going to assign a new tracking barcode. So tracking barcode 596 would now appear on the label printer in receiving, and I stick it onto that box, and I can now track that specific box of 10 with tracking barcode 596. So let's remember tracking barcode 596 because we're going to use it to go and see what I've done here. But you can see I've now got 92 of 100 compared to the 82 I had previously because I received an additional 10. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to receive that next item code. And in this case, I've got to receive 100. I will receive 100 of that item. And I'm going to give it a new tracking barcode 597. Now what you'll notice is that line has disappeared from my purchase order because I can no longer receive against it. It has been fully received. But I can go to this button, complete, show or hide, and show that line, and you can see it is completed. 100 of 100 has been received. Now, it's important to note that what I'm busy doing is I'm busy in my receiving bay in front of the physical stock, labeling and receiving the stock. At this point, I'm validating, but I'm not sending anything back to Evolution or back to the ERP at this point. Only when I finish the activity of receiving, and I could have 3 people working on receiving on this document. When we finish that activity, what we do is go to another option on the menu called Post. And now this user doesn't have the post function. So a supervisor could come along and say, I want to check what you've done. And if he's happy with what has been done, I haven't got a super user. I'm going to log on as a different user. He can go receiving post, put the purchase order number in, and post it. And when he does that, it creates the GRV in Evolution. So it takes the data that we used in receiving, it summarizes all the boxes we labeled, and it creates a GRV in Evolution for you. Now there's 2 things. That GRV can be saved or it can be posted. Right, I want to go back to the receiving of that item, but this time I'm going to use this receiving with detail screen. So you saw on the previous one that I received the quantity, I pressed enter to create a new tracking barcode, and it received that specific box. If I go into receiving with detail, this is a different receiving process that I configured by taking my original one and modifying it. And now you'll see I've defaulted the location, so I can press enter on it. I'm then going to use the same document to receive against, and it shows me my items. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this stock code here, which is the 50. And now you'll see it ask me for the batch number, because this receiving process has been configured with detail where it asks me for a batch. So I'm going to say my batch on this one is about IT-0001. And my expiry date is 2020 12/31. So that's the end of 2020. And then it asks me for the quantity per pallet. So in this case, I know I've got to receive 50. I'm going to say there's 10 per pallet. And then it asks me for the number of pallets. So I'm going to say there's 5 pallets. So now what Granite does is it prints 5 tracking barcodes, barcode number 598 through to 602. Each of them has got 10 on it. And you can see that that line has now been fully received. And in my warehouse, I've got 10 pallets or 5 pallets of 10 per pallet. I'm going to refresh this purchase order dashboard, and you can see that it's gone green. I'm now 90% complete against this order. So while you're busy receiving, you can see what the progress is. And you can see who worked on it last, that's user, and when the last date was that they touched that purchase order. So you can see the detail of the purchase order, how much they've received so far. But in addition to that, I can go back to my inventory tab, to transactions, and go and put that same purchase order number in the transactions. I can't remember what it was. It's 1074. And it shows you the receiving transactions that have been done so far against purchase order 1074. And over here, you can see that user 0, that was my super user, received these 5 pallets, 598, 599, 600, 601, 602, with a quantity of 10 per pallet. And that was the date and time that those were received on. That's in the transaction level. On the stock detail, I can go and say, show me that stock code. And there are my 5 pallets received, and they're all sitting in the receiving location. They've got a batch number about IT, and they've got the expiry date on them. So this is at a Granite level. So now what's going to happen is, while we're still busy receiving this one, or afterwards, depending on how we specified the process, I can get someone to go and move them. So I want an operator to go to move on his scanner. He scans the tracking barcode, which is the pallet number. So in this case, number 598, I need to scan it. And then he scans the location he's putting it into. So we put it into location A11. And it says it's moved barcode 598 to location A11. I'm going to also move 599 to A11. And I'm going to move 600 to A12. So now when I refresh my stock detail view, you will see that barcode 598 and 599 are in location A11. Barcode 600 is in A12, and I still have 601 and 602 in the receiving area. So at the end of the day, someone goes into this screen and they say, show me what's in my receiving area. And all they have to do is type in REC in the location, and it shows you everything that's still in your receiving area. That hasn't been put away yet. And that's one of the physical controls in the warehouse, is to say, have I cleared out my receiving area and gone and put away all my stock? So you may ask the question, does Granite automatically tell you where to put things? It is possible. So when I scan something in receiving, I can suggest a location that I would like the guy to take it to. And I can validate that he takes it to that specific location. In this specific case, I've said they can put it anywhere, but we are able to validate that and to stop them from doing things that we don't want them to do. But similarly, Granite doesn't, we don't do what's called task direction, which means I don't send a message to the scanner to say, I need you to go to receiving and go do this. A supervisor still says, or an operator still says, I need to go and do putaways. And then he goes into the move menu and he says, tell me where I must put this. So the system is not task driven, but we can recommend and manage what the optimal place for something to go. Okay, so what I've done so far, just to recap, I have covered master files. I discussed locations and master items. I discussed users and user permissions. We then went into inventory and I showed you reports and what you can see under stock detail. I showed you the detail under transactions, and I showed you under inbound, the receiving execution, and on the scanner, the receiving process. So I now want to do a couple of more things around inventory. So I want to discuss the movement and replenishments. If I go back to my menu and I now say I want to replenish stock, what you'll see is it says replenish from tracking barcode. So I now need to go to a from tracking barcode, scan it, and say how many am I taking and where am I taking it to. Now, if I had the report, I would know what to do, but I can also press enter for a suggestion. So when I press enter, it tells me I want you to replenish that stock code, which I set up earlier, and I want you to take it to pick location A06, and I want you to take 100 of them. Now, in this replenishment instruction, I can also include where to go and find that stock in bulk, and what location and what pallet number to go and replenish from. But in this case, I've just said, go and find the stock and replenish it. So I totally admit when I configured this, I should have added the from location and the from tracking barcode as well. But that's an example of sort of directing an operator to do something. And in fact, it's quite possible that I don't have stock of that in the warehouse, which means I do have stock of that in the warehouse. So it should have shown you where to replenish from. Right, that's replenishment. I now want to just cover things like scrap. If I've made a mistake, I can scrap a tracking entity. If integration is turned on for the scrap transaction, so obviously you only want a supervisor to do it, it can be set up to automatically do a journal entry back into Evolution. Likewise, I can do an adjustment on a tracking entity. So I can say I'm doing a quantity decrease, and I can specify a reference number, adjustment reference Craig, and then I can scan the barcode, tracking barcode 598. Now it tells me it's in location A11, it has a quantity of 10, and it's that batch number and expiry date. What do I want to adjust by? So I'm going to adjust by a quantity of 2. So it's going to do a quantity decrease down to 8. And I'm going to say 2 taken for customer sample. And I can confirm it. And now it's adjusted, tracking barcode 598 by 2. Some other stock functions that we've got things like palletize. That allows me to take multiple boxes and put it onto a single pallet and move it around. And reclassify of stock. There's various other options we've got, so I'm not going to go into now. So again, to save or to keep to schedule, I'm now going to move on to outbound. So outbound obviously is how we get stock out of the warehouse. It's probably the most important part of any warehouse management system. The goal of Granite, apart from keeping the stock accurate in the warehouse and to physically reflect what's in the warehouse, is to get stock out of the warehouse quickly. So you want to satisfy your orders as quickly as possible, and you want to keep it as simple as possible. When you add a sales order into Evolution, it will automatically appear in Granite on the order execution screen. So these are the sales orders that are currently in Evolution waiting to be picked. And you can see progress on some of them. Those are the completed ones. That one's 92% complete. If I go on to that one, it's complete apart from these lines that are still highlighted in blue. And you can see there's no stock of that line and there's no stock of that line, and that stock is in a reserved location. So that's why he hasn't finished this order. But if I go to order number 7149, you can see that I picked one line complete. It's 15% complete. The last person who worked on it was Albert, and we worked on it yesterday. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my scanner and I'm going to pick more of order number 7149. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to log on as Albert. And I'm now going to go to picking. Now you'll see that I've got two modes here. I've got a specific document mode or assign next document. If I say assign next document, Granite's going to give him the next document to pick. So in other words, there's no pick slip. He just says, what must I go pick next, and it gives him his next picking document. But in this case, I'm going to actually say I want to pick order number 7149 because the customer's waiting. So I've selected a specific document mode. What location do I need to bring the stock to? That's the dispatch location. What's my picking slip number? So in this case, I would scan it if it's on the picking slip, or I would type it in if I know it. And then it shows me what I have to pick. So you can see if I go to what has been picked completed, I can see that that line is completed, so I can't pick any more of it. I can hide the completed lines. The first line here is this powerful spike light, but there's no stock of it. There's no stock of the next line item. This line item here, I can go pick. And it tells me that I can go to location C21 and find tracking barcode 145. So let's go look at that in stock. I'll go to my inventory, stock detail, go to my barcode. 145 has got a quantity of 95 in location C21. So on my scanner, in location C21, I walk up to that location and it tells me to scan the from tracking barcode. Now, because it's a serialized tracking license plate barcode, when I scan it, it knows where that barcode is. So I don't have to say what location am I picking it from. All I have to do is scan the barcode that I'm taking it from and specify how many I'm taking. Now the quantity required is 1. It says I've got 95 on that pallet. So I take 1 and the pick's successful. That's all you have to do to pick is scan the barcode on the product, and that's the tracking barcode. Specify the quantity you're taking, and the pick is successful. It's completed. So that line, those lines have disappeared. So I've got these 2 are out of stock. I've got 1 line left, and there's 2 on that line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to tracking barcode 40. Now, let's say I went to the wrong product. So now I went to tracking barcode 598, which is one of those ones that I received earlier. It tells me you can't find that stock code on the picking document. So I can't scan the wrong barcode. It stops me from doing that. If I do scan the right barcode, which is barcode number 40, it goes in and allows me to go to the next step, which is quantity, and says how many you want to take. I'm going to take 1 of them. So now the pick's successful, but I've only part picked that line. So I can now go back to that pallet and take the next one. And now that line's completed. I can't pick any more because I don't have any more stock. So if I go to my desktop application now and I refresh my stock detail on that pallet number 145, it updated immediately. And if I clear this, my stock detail will be live updated. But now I can go to my transactions and say my order number, I've got that order number wrong. It's order number OR007149. 001. My memory is terrible. 7149. 7149. There are my pick transactions, and it tells me that Albert has picked from barcode number 2. He's picked twice, and it went from quantity of 70 down to 67 because he picked 3. Then it went from 67 to 64, and he picked another 3. Then he picked 95, picked 1 from pallet 145. That's the one that we did now. There's the dates and time at 9:51, and he picked 1 of those. Then we picked 10 from that pallet, and then the same pallet, pallet number 40, I picked 1 and another 1 from it. So those are my transactions. Who did it? What time did he do it? From which pallet? For which order number? And which stock code? So I've got traceability down to the individual pallet that he visited and what the from and to quantity was for that pallet. And if I were to say what are my batch numbers and lot numbers, if there were batch numbers associated, I have the batch number and the serial number and the expiry date for that pallet as well. Right, so what I'm going to do now, that's picking in a nutshell. There's one more thing about picking, is that a question will come as to how can you pick multiple orders for a load, for example, in one picking run, or what we call a wave. So we've got this thing called Pick Slip Manager. Pick Slip Manager allows me to look at all orders, go and see what is in the order, and then I can go and say, well, I want to take that line and that line and that line and pick those all together on a single pick slip. And what the Granite will do is will create a pick slip for me with a summarized set of pick instructions for multiple pick orders, and it will allow me to go and pick that picking slip and bring that stock into a load bay, for example. So picking can be a lot more complex than what I've shown you, but the basics of Granite is that you want to pick order by order. And if I look at our 100 plus customers, probably 90% of them, or 90 of them, were picking individual pick slips. They don't necessarily, and we find that in this mid-market, that the average customer uses one picker and picks one pick slip. Granite can handle 10 pickers picking one pick slip, or 10 pickers picking one order. Granite can handle one picker picking an order over 4 days, and it can handle multiple shipments. So like with receiving, when you do your picking, it's picking it in Granite, it's not doing anything in Evolution until such time as I post the pick slip. When I post the pick slip, and you go on the menu to picking post, I put my pick slip number in. What it does is it creates the shipments or the invoices in Evolution based on what I have picked. Now, in many warehouses, there are steps in between that. So what you can do is you can pick, and then you can pack or check, and you can pick to a transfer or sorting location. Then you can check it and put it into boxes. Then the boxes can be palletized. You specify the dimension and you hand it over to a courier, or you pick it direct to the truck. So there's a lot of different combinations of how that outbound process works, and Granite can facilitate most of those. So what I want to do, and I want to wrap up on the scanner, is we've got a lot of other menu options like lookup, label printing. Here I've got a special function reserved with label. So what Granite can do is Granite can customize any specific process. And I want to give you another view of another menu system. I'm going to go on to a new Granite system. This is a Granite system that's currently hosted on Amazon Web Services in the cloud. And I'm going to log on to this one, and I want to show you how different the menu is. So in this specific Granite menu, you can see I've got register new ink bottle, register canister, move from tech to logistics, QC complete and move. This is a special use case that we've developed that's actually live at the moment, and it's to support replenishing and replacing the ink bottles on ATM machines. So we've got a warehouse where we manage ink bottles and canisters, and we then go and scan them onto the ATM machines and take the old ones back and bring them back to the warehouse. And the menu structure is totally different to the standard one that I've been showing you up to now, which was the standard sort of user type menu. And that just points to the fact that Granite is very configurable. Right. I think we're just about out of time, and I don't have much more to discuss other than a quick discussion around manufacturing. Within manufacturing, we have the ability to pull a job from Evolution into Granite, and we can look under manufacturing execution and see what the job is. On that job, we would have input products and output products. And what you then do is with the scanner, you can go into the warehouse and you can go and pick the products that you want to send into the job and transfer them to a work in progress area. You can then go and consume those products as you work on the job, and it will do the consume of stock in Granite. It's then possible to post that consume back into Evolution to update that you used the product. And as the finished goods product comes out of that location, we can label it with Granite, and we can produce a finished goods label and then process the stock in Evolution to say we've manufactured it. So Granite controls the stock movement. So it's not like Expedite where you control the job and the costing and everything else. But what it does do is it allows you to manage the stock going into a job and the stock coming out of the job, so that we can manage the inventory in Granite and label the inventory correctly and move it around correctly. That's all I want to cover under manufacturing. And then finally, under stock take, I want to show you this control center. Within Granite, we have a control center, and I have what's called, or these tabs. I've got the outstanding tab. So I go and I create a session. A session says, what do you want to stock take? Either a set of locations, a set of item codes, or a wall-to-wall stock take in the warehouse. It then shows me what's outstanding. What haven't I scanned in the warehouse on the screen here? On the next tab, it shows me what I have counted, and on the next tab, what I have approved. So if I go to this session here, under counted, I have what's been counted so far, and what has been approved so far, and what's been completed so far. And there's a stock taking can be a whole webinar in its own right, so I don't want to go into more detail other than to say, in the outstanding tab, I can say keep the inventory, or scrap the inventory, or keep inventory and quantity. In other words, I haven't found it, but I want to keep it, or I haven't found it, so therefore scrap it, or I haven't found it, so keep the barcode, but make it 0. Likewise, under counted, I can go and see everything that's been counted in count 1 and count 2, and I can process it and update Granite. Once I've approved it in Granite and I apply my changes, it fixes stock in Granite wherever I found variances. It still hasn't touched the accounting system yet. At this point, I can go and export the results of my count and update a count sheet in Evolution, so that the count sheet can then be processed by the accountants to accept the variances. Now, assuming that we are happy that the stock take is correct in Granite, it's a case of just accepting the variances in Evolution. And if the variance is too great, going and sending it back to the warehouse and say, we're not happy with this, please confirm it. Right, so that pretty much wraps up what I want to tell you, and thank you for listening. There's a lot more to Granite than what is visible to the eye and what's visible in this demonstration. Hence, we can do things like tracking of gas cylinders, tracking of mattresses in a warehouse, and everything in between. Thank you very much.